Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope all of you are enjoying day 2 of the People Matters L&D Conference 2021 so far. We still have many more exciting sessions for you coming up, so keep participating, asking questions, and engaging, and get your name up on that leaderboard to win some very exciting prizes. I'm going to set some context for this fireside chat for this session. In this post-pandemic environment, while organizations strategize and plan for success, how should career roadmaps be structured for the next normal? How can organizations balance the needs of the employee and the organization, and ultimately craft a learning agenda that can align with the aspirations of employees and help organizations close in on their ideal capability makeup at the same time? For the insights and expertise to the answers to these questions, it's my pleasure to welcome the panel on stage. First up, we have Kamal Dutta, Managing Director at Skillsoft India. He will be the chair for our panel. Kamal. We will also have on our panel Sachin Nakar, Chief Learning Officer and Head of Talent Acquisition and Head of HR at Forbes Marshall. We also have Jaladi Taka, GM of L&D at Tata Motors Limited. And last but not least, we have Pratnya Arun, Head of Learning Technologies at Aditya Birla Management Corporation Private Limited. Kamal, I'll pass the floor to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Exar. Really appreciate. Always a pleasure to be part of this forum. It's a great topic, and there has been so much discussion. So let me build a quick context around what we will be discussing. Coming out of pandemic, and I hope we are out of it now, with billion doses administered, is that we saw so many changes, more from an L&D context, which we have been speaking about since yesterday and in multiple other forums. Things like hybrid, how do you have e-learning at scale? The good news was that during this time, those people who were on the bench on e-learning versus more traditional ways of learning were tipping over more to the e-learning side of it, and which was good for the e-learning because it could be done at scale, work from home, etc. We also saw L&D pretty much emerge in the front. When things were at the peak, there were discussions around employee resilience, empathy, well-being, mental health, and perhaps L&D was in the front because it was seen that learning is an employee engagement tool as well. Once the pandemic was getting over, or we had a better handle of it, what we saw was a huge shift and acceleration, if I may say so. We have always been talking about digital transformation, the fact that organizations are more reliant on technology, every business is a software business, and so on. But what we saw post that was a step up in an acceleration in digital adoption, predominantly in around areas like automation, AI, robotics, data science. Essentially, people wanted to build digital literacy at scale. At the same time, L&D was, while they were facilitating this and building these competencies, the thing that navigated towards, as everybody wanted to adapt to this kind of talents, was this period of great resignation and a talent war. Broadly, the skill gaps that existed became pretty much apparent. So with that context, and I built this context because I think we have, whatever I spoke about has been touched in multiple different forums and multiple different occasions. What I wanted to do today and achieve was really how does L&D go about, one, fixing the last skill gaps that have emerged recently due to the pace of technology shifts, is acquisition versus upskilling. So let me start with Sachin. Let's start with you and say, Give me a bit more context around what skill gaps are you seeing and what would be the ones that are important for the future of work in your organization.
Sure, Kamal. Thank you for that value. What you rightly said, we always knew the importance of digital being virtual. This pandemic really pushed us in a way into this. When we speak about skill gaps, I think skill gaps were always there, and they will always be there. What has changed though is the role of L&D in bridging those skill gaps. And I think we all understand that. Earlier, L&D professionals were content creators. We would design programs. We would have ID experts on the team. But I think in last 18 months, what we have seen in all the industries now is the content is created. Content is there in abundance. So our employees are not at the mercy of any L&D or HR to bring out a program, curate a program, design a program for them. They can do it at any time at their own pace. So I think the role of L&D has changed. I think it has moved from content creators to more working on the context. And I think if we work on the context of creating that learnability in our employees, that will fetch us more results. So it's really the difference between what tools you can provide uh, and on the other side, what context you can create. And I am really not for providing tools. I'm really for creating that context when it comes to L&D.
Absolutely.
The million-dollar question is, how do you create that context? How do you create that learnability? And I think context is not created through one system, one process. There are multiple systems that we have to create to enable that learning appetite in the minds of the learner. So in our setup, what we have done really is uh, we have borrowed some principles from the quarters change management model. Although it is applicable at a org level, we can always have some principles applied at the individual change level. And we have created systems like career architecture model, aligning the L&D framework to that career architecture model, getting into more frequent dialogues and more frequent reviews, getting into technical coaching and all. So we can talk through this discussion, but at a broader level, I think it's creating context through multiple systems and procedures in the changed environment.
Sure. So that's great, and we'll talk about some of these frameworks, etc. Just subsequently, Sachin, and we'll get to you on that. Pratyam, just your view. You're a large conglomerate. How are you seeing this emergence of skill gaps? You have different businesses ranging from IT to very traditional businesses. Are all businesses facing skill gaps at scale? And what are you planning in doing to address those?
Yeah, thanks, Kamal, for this question. So, for us, it's a mix of both. At some businesses we are facing this issue. At some businesses we are not, because those business are the processes are gonna remain like kind of same for at least few years to come. But yes, there are some businesses where we are facing this issue big time. So my however, I agree with Sachin what he said. My one submission to that part will be that we need to focus on understanding and identifying the skill gap. I think that's the must, because what's happening is that in the pandemic, especially, we had seen is that we were just giving out the learning at that faster pace. So much of learning was available. So I think we should pause and reflect what is that skill gap, and put a strong reflection towards it. Whenever I think of reflection, I think of a word called brilliant basics. In brilliant basics, basics itself means kind of a structured reflection. So I personally feel we should kind of reflect. And also what at least I have seen is that whenever we think of an issue, we think learning will solve that problem. However, it's true, but it's not the only learning will solve that problem. you know. So for example, when you talk about you want to inculcate trust in your organization, obviously there are, like, trust theories, trust courses which you can do, but only learning will not solve the problem. So I feel we need to have a clear cut bifurcation between the technical and adaptive skills. For technical skills, there is a straight cut learning which is there, which you can do, in various forms. But if it is adaptive skill which needs to be kind of inculcated in the organization, then you need to think of things beyond classroom, beyond, like, a specific online learning pattern. You need to think of coaching, you need to think of mentoring, and you need to think at that pace that the way you're thinking right now will not work. Maybe, like, say, for a huge organization of our size, of, like, say, 1 lakh plus people in the various companies of Aditya Birla Group, you need to think coaching at an exponential rate. Like, right now, if you're producing 100 coaches a year, you need to think that, how you multiply by 100x. And I think that will be my larger skill advice, to fix this larger skills in the new normal. And I think new normal, I think it's overword used. I think we are already there, so we should just start at an exponential rate, I feel. This is what I would like to say.
Thanks, Pandra. Really appreciate it. I think there were some great nuggets for the L&D folks listening in terms of the fact that, yes, e-learning is good, but it's not a solution for everything. You need still humans to intervene. You still need that human factor, especially given now when we are all alone working from home. We are craving for some of this human touch element in terms of coaching. Blended learnings is being talked about, where you can have some interventions from facilitators and so on and so forth. So, Jaladi, I just wanted to move to a second part of the question, but you can still address the skill gap, especially in your Tata group. But more than that, I think what I wanted to really look at, based on what Pratna said, is that whose agenda is really learning, at one level, there is this book which is available in Skillsoft Percipio, which is called the Technology Fallacy. And it kind of talks about that it is the individuals who adapt to the technology first, and then the organizations, and then governments, regulatory, and so on and so forth. So, and the individuals learn it because of their curiosity, in some cases anxiety, in some cases whatever they are seeing as change, and they learn on their own to some extent. So very interesting to hear your thoughts on both skill as well as who's is learning. Is it the managers, is it individual, or is it the company?
Sure. Thanks, Kamal. And so let me build on what Sachin and Pradnya just shared. So when it comes to typically when we look at skill gaps, see, if you see, and maybe out of the uh, entire group perspective, maybe if I focus on Tata Motors, primarily, disruptions are happening all across, right? Major disruptions in terms of mobility solutions, in terms of how an automotive product is being perceived, right, by the end consumer. And so therefore, the expectation in terms of what do you provide, whether you provide a product, whether you provide a service, whether you provide an experience, or whether you provide all of that packaged in one particular set of, I would say, element. All this ultimately talks to the skill building. And if everything has to be provided, the organization definitely starts thinking on all these fronts, because finally for the end customer, end consumer, it's an experience, isn't it? So how, and a lot of back work has to happen internally so that the final experience wins. And that is very critical. Every business thrives because they, to the best extent, they're able to manage their customers well. So I think this is something very predominantly the fabric, even in Tata Motors, when we talk about skilling, looking at skill gaps, looking at building skill capability in people. It doesn't matter whether it is functional, behavioral, technical, leadership, and all. I mean, everything comes under this particular context. Now, coming to the second part, Kamal, when we take this context and move forward, actually, when it comes to a responsibility or an accountability, I think it is for all, whether it is the organization, whether it is people managers, people leaders, whether it is employees. I mean, the responsibility stands up across all these three spectrums. But however, the manifestation is very different. So primarily, what happens is, let's say when you look at an organization, how do they build something like learning into their strategic agenda? So, for example, when you take simple frameworks, we spoke about frameworks and architectures. When you take simple frameworks like a balance scorecard, right? Balance scorecard has all avenues. It has customer perspective, it has finance, it has processes, but there is that learning and growth, which is very substantial, right? So that actually paves the way from an organization perspective. For people managers, it's an accountability not only for themselves but also to their direct reports and their teams, to see that how they can up the bar consistently. And when it comes to individuals, yes, today the it's like people are actually having a huge amount of choice, as Pradnya was also mentioning. So how do they select? How do they really think of their career? And so therefore, basis that, how do they select the curricula courses which are available? And last, which with that I'll close my point, is for L&D. L&D as a team, what is critical is how they can provide um, exciting avenues on a platter. See, the whole era of kind of pushing learning has gone, right? People have a huge amount of choice in which they can decide. So I decide what I need to learn for myself. I am the custodian of my career. How do I build myself? On that, if there is a plethora of things which are available, then people can then choose. They can not only choose the content, they can also choose as per their learning style. And this becomes very critical when we have to empower the entire ecosystem around learning. So these were my few thoughts. Kamal, back to you.
No, fantastic, Jaladi. Really appreciate. I think you touched upon so many good things. I don't know which one to pick up from, but I think there are two, three things I want to pick up. One is that learning should be everybody's goal and everybody's KPI, not just L&D. Across the organization, if we have to transform at scale, basically. I think from your perspective, I also enjoyed the fact that you mentioned, and all three of you are Skillsoft customers, and I know you are pretty much aware of what we offer. But for a longest period of time, we have always believed that every individual wants to learn differently and should be allowed to learn in the way they want to learn rather than being force fitted into one particular model or area, because one size doesn't fit all. And what we are also realizing now is this human element into this whole equation, because while we have tipped over from our traditional classrooms to e-learning in general across the industry, what we are finding is that those interventions can be of immense material value, and that's what Pradnya was talking about. Perhaps also because of a bit of digital fatigue, isn't it? So many webinars and meetings happening on the digital context. So, Sachin, coming back to you, you heard where we started from, and we have now moved towards learning agendas and this. Before I go into competencies and frameworks, any quick thoughts, addition to what Jaladi and Pradnya said about L&D's role as such?
So I completely agree with Jaladi. It is everyone's agenda for sure. I mean, ideally, we would want that learnability at the individual level, right? If that learnability exists at each individual level, then we don't need L&D. We don't need any business manager to kind of coach you. Unfortunately, we don't have that individual learnability. People want to learn. We want to do many things, but we don't do it. That's the problem. We want to be healthy. Information is there. Why? What is it that you need to do to be healthy? But we don't do it. And therefore, I think L&D's role is to build that appetite, to create context where people can learn. I think L&D and HR guys have understood that information has a limited power to change people. While so much of information is available across, we also need to know and appreciate that it has a limited power to change people. And therefore, how do we get more into what Pradnya said earlier, into coaching, into equipping our business leaders, managers to be coaches, to provide that uh, kind of anchoring at the most granular level. We need to create frameworks, but we don't have to hold on to those frameworks. We need to just let go certain times. And what I feel and experience at times is sometimes we get so attached to our own creations that we don't, while we say that HR, the business managers should be HR managers, we don't let go the frameworks that we create to enable learning. So at individual level, yes, uh, the ownership, primary ownership lies there of learning. L&D is an enabler, and obviously business managers have their own roles to play.
No, absolutely, and it's like what should I say? Everybody understands it's important to learn, but people seldom take out the right time. In fact, I was reading that employees at best do anything between 14 to 20 minutes in India per week of learning. So to expect that they curate their own learning paths and journeys may be a stretch at best. But even if they do, curation is not an easy job, as you all know. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes resources. It's complex because today you want to curate journeys which are not only about some video being played out, you want to include practice and competency development and testing and assessment, and journeys have to be that framework of building those journeys are much more complex today when you know that there are elements of mentorship, coaching, practice, assessment, all need to be built on those paths basically, and they have to be curated based on the organizational goals, and sometimes that may be slightly different from a people's aspiration point of view. To get that visibility, etc., is also important, and therefore this talk about adjacent frameworks, so, adjacency skills within those learning journeys and paths, which can give an employee the opportunity to learn something else, which is going to be material value both to the organization as well as to the individual. So I want to start with that and talk about how does L&D really build this competency framework. So Jaladi, can you start with you and see how, on that? Yeah.
Sure, Kamal. So I would address this in two parts. First is, see, we have to address actually two soft dimensions, and then look at something which is more concrete, which is more hard, right? So one is when we look at a career transition, career architecture, career framework. Um, See, people and employees are quite vulnerable. They always seek. They have that kind of an element of risk in their mind, whether I'm taking a right step. Whether this transition will work for me, whether I'll be able to succeed in what I'm doing. So, to whichever role they are going or whichever transition they are making, in that particular role, if there is a substantial mention of capability building, the what, how, why of capability building. Okay, if you want to develop these functional skills, probably following is available. If you are looking at professional skills, following is available. If you are looking at leadership skills, probably following is available. If that kind of support is provided, uh, it becomes, you may call it a brochure or a dossier or whatever, but the moment the person looks at it, it's not just a role and responsibility and accountability. It is also that how, as an organization, we are building you to become successful, right? So this particular message addresses the vulnerability part of anybody who is going to make a transition. Now we all know, when we look at career architecture and career frameworks, these are largely business driven, right? So basis what business model will work is how the job roles and everything is defined. So probably it's also important that the employees understand that when these transitions happen, they have to be mindful how they want to traverse. And if these three areas of let's say, how can I leverage experience in this role, how can I leverage some capability in this role, how can I accrue some leadership in this role, if this is provided on a platter, I think that vulnerability can be addressed. So this is point number one, Kamal. Second, which I wanted to mention, was in terms of how. So when we look at career architectures, career frameworks, uh, people often feel that that it is always timed. So people will think that, okay, let me spend 2 years and then I'll move to somewhere else. Let me spend 3 years and then I'll do something else. There is also a time for maturity in that role, and there is also a time for doing multiple stuff when you are in that role. Unless and until you're exposed to different kind of avenues, you are getting experience of different roles, and at the same time you are not reflecting back for a good number of years. I mean, that can vary anywhere between 3 to 5 years. You have really not excelled in that role. So what happens is you are not able to really say with satisfaction that the transition that you took, whether that was successful or not. I mean, both from your perspective as well as from the organization's perspective. So I think if these two things are being addressed, so one is vulnerability and second is appreciating the, I would say, success of people in that role. If these two things are managed, rest all can be mobilized through all the brick and mortar that we have in L&D. Right? So that's my
Yeah, that's fantastic, Jalad. I really think addressing it from a vulnerability and designing competencies and throwing it open in the sense that they can choose and see are great ways of doing it. There is no one size fits all model in this competency framework. They have to be aligned for business, and that has been a you know gigantic problem to solve because there's so many industries, so many different countries, etc. Pradya, as you look at a very diverse set and you think about competency frameworks, I'm sure you realize that those again need to be curated by businesses. My question to you is really, and I think there are some questions coming on the screen as well. When you build about this career path, how much of that should be through this competency frameworks, adjacency, and then how much of that really is, from an organization point of view, L&D has been about also value discovery and value realization and proving the ROI and so on and so forth. So you have to mix and match all those factors while building this framework. So any thoughts that you have that has worked for you in ABG while you're building this competency frameworks? Uh, I'm sure it works for leadership and few other areas, but at a functional, it may be more hard. But very keen to understand what works or what worked in ABG group. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, Kamal. You ask me, I somewhere, don't believe in the terminology called as career architecture. I feel there's something called a larger goal, which an organization or an individual needs to meet. And to achieve that larger goal, there are set of skills which are needed. And obviously, those set of skills are pumped in by various other factors, around that particular, goal sort of. So personally, I feel when we are thinking of new normal, the things are changing at such a faster pace. The amount of energy we spend in building the architecture by that time, that particular, I don't know, career will be there or not there, sort of. So hence I feel we should be, as an L&D, at least what we are practicing is that we are focusing on a goal, and then what are the set of skills which are needed to get there. In one of our business, suddenly everything was supposed to sell in an online mode. So you kind of, you can't be keeping yourself busy that how should you sell it on a shop floor, like, because pandemic kind of hit us, and you can't shut your business sort of, like that. So you have to ensure that what are the new skills which are needed, to operate in a virtual mode and with no time. So I feel goal and skills is something you should keep in mind, and look at that architecture as. I personally feel, when we look at the goal, it's like, at least in our organization, when we were wanting to achieve any goal, it's like driving any vehicle, and vehicle is nothing but an individual is driving, but that vehicle will only work, not because that individual has good engine or whatever. That vehicle will work when the tires are working properly, and the tires can be financial tires, social, emotional, personal, and all this can be done only with the good learning. If one of the tires is kind of bursted, or say for example your financial tire is bursted, you will not be able to drive in a smoother way to reach that goal. And I personally feel learning is like petrol. If you are not learning, you will not be able to achieve to that goal. So you have to keep learning. You have to keep enhancing the skills. Organization provides you that GPS system, but you have to ensure that you navigate it well. And when we talk about driving, actually, I was thinking yesterday while driving only, I was thinking there are driverless cars also coming up in the market. So you don't know when your job will be kind of replaced by any automated, robot or any automated technology. So you have to keep your eye open. You have to keep learning that what are the external factors also affecting. I think that's new normal for me. That's career architecture for me, in the new normal. Maybe we have seen the concept called wages, we have seen the concept of salary. I think there will be a time, not very soon, but again, I'm not sure about the time. I'm not sure about that English word also, or the HR word, what it will be called as. But there will be something new, which will, for your skills, you will get paid for, and not for the amount of time you spend in the.
Yeah, it's something like a gig economy, and that's where we are
Absolutely.
going towards. So, look, there is one thing about a competency framework, but I think your point is it needs to be flexible, it needs to be adaptable. I can tell you some of our thoughts around this has been to keep it evergreen, which means as context changes, like a pandemic comes in front of us, these journeys, architectures are flexible enough to adapt to those business emergencies or disruptions, as you call them, as well. So the ability to keep it evergreen through curation is a separate topic by itself, not for today, but we can talk about it some other time. On the paucity of time, Sachin, you heard both Jaladi and they are talking about this competency frameworks. You started with that, so I just wanted to give you 2 3 minutes. If you can just quickly sum up, I want to take some questions from the audience as well.
Sure, Kamal. So we believe in providing the career architecture and related competency framework. And when we say career architecture, it's not unidimensional. I mean, it has both the elements of business and individual. Individuals need to grow, provided organization grows. If one grows without the other, then obviously we are talking about an imbalanced system. So if I work for an organization, I am pretty much investing my career in that organization. So I need to know when would I progress and how can I get onto the next band or layer. And there comes the importance of having clarity, to have to know what is it that I need to do to progress. We were facing this problem about 3 or 4 years back, where career growth and those were the issues. Through our internal surveys, we came to know that we need to address those pieces, and therefore we kind of initiated a reorg drive. We redesigned roles, mapped those roles. We call the code name of the project was Bibinka, but it stayed on even after implementation. So the org design in our case, it's still known as Bibinka. What we do and what we can confidently say right now is that all the members of our organization know where do they fit in, where their role fits in. If they have to progress, then what is the criteria to make it to the next layer or band, and what is it that they need to deliver in that particular band. Alongside it, then you attach your competency framework to the career architecture, saying that if you need to be there, then what is it that organization provides you in terms of support and the enabling mechanism. And then you have to also align the performance management system and all the other pieces together so that it becomes a holistic system and not a standalone system. So that's my short answer here.
So I want to take an audience question. Thanks, Sachin. Drishti is asking, how can L&D leaders help employee build a career path that works for them and help them grow in that career? Any examples on creating a self-managed learning culture? What has worked, basically, from a self-managed learning culture? Anybody? Pradnya, Jaladi, Sachin?
Yeah, I can take it up. I feel, L&D can definitely only help, but the ownership lies completely with an individual. I think what L&D can do is that create that clear cut feeling that what is there for an individual in that particular learning. Say for example, if an individual is joining at a graduate level, he or she knows that a post graduation will take him or her to the next level. Come on earth, anything, nothing can stop him or her to do that post graduation, but making sure that what L&D can do is that kind of inculcate that culture feeling that about is that what is needed to be learned, sort of, like Henry Ford said that if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Like right now you go and ask people what they wanted, they'll say digital. But is that something which you want people to learn? That's something which I think L&D can inculcate, but the ownership an individual needs to take. That's the example which I give.
Sure. There's this great question coming from Vishesh Gupta talking about micro-learning, given the paucity of time, a distracted generation, a generation which doesn't have losing attention spans, etc. How can organizations maximize micro-learning or bite-sized learning uh, as L&D professionals?
So
I
I
can
think
take that. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Jaladi. Please go ahead.
Pradnya, you wanted to take it, or should I?
No,
Go
I
ahead?
think Skillsoft had done a fantastic job for us, and I would like to appreciate you guys. You guys had literally chopped into pieces one learning module, and the way you guys have chopped it, I really like it. And the way we use it, through WhatsApp, wherever they are available, send it to them. You don't have to make sure that what time they learn. You just have to send it to them. I think chopping and dicing in in smaller chunks is the thing, and that would we can think of different ways of communication, but chopping and is the right term for that. Jaladi,
Yeah,
what do you
shopping, but with some bit of instructional design. I
yeah
presume it is still hard work to keep doing that at smaller granular levels. So yeah, Jaladi, if you wanted to talk about
Sure.
this micro-learning.
Sure, absolutely. No, I just wanted to. So, if it is Vishesh, I just wanted to mention that. See, one is the pedagogy or the methodology of learning, and second is what is the need for the learner. We as L&D, we have to distinctly differentiate between these two. There is a possibility that if I focus on micro learning, probably I may just get a pinch or a drop of what I want to learn. But many of these roles, careers, frameworks, they actually shine out if you go deeper, right? And for that, sometimes, and that's why L&D has a plethora of pedagogies or andragogies, as you say it. That could be micro learning, macro learning. You have classroom sessions, and so on and so forth. So these are available because you need to address different learning styles of employees, irrespective of whether it is Gen Z or millennials or whoever. Basis the type of the content, how you can help the learner consume it, reflect on it, and then make it a part of his personality. I think if this is the focus, I think that is something which we as an L&D should kind of venture out to do.
No, absolutely agree with you, Jaladi. And I think when you think about again that one shoe fits everyone kind of a model doesn't work. But yes, micro learning is great for informal learning, for curiosity based learning. It encourages you to learn things which you ordinarily won't go to a classroom for. And it works well for the generation to, go about it. But yes, it is not a replacement for more deeper coaching style blended learning. And I think somewhere both of them need to exist within the ecosystem of learning and more, which you need to do. But I think we need also flexibility to move away from traditional structures, look at learner experience, look at learner's time, look at learner's interest, and then curate it as much as possible, which is aligned to organization. So with that, it was great having all three of you. There are more questions, to be honest, and we don't have time. So really appreciate your thoughts. I hope the L&D folks who were listening to you, all of you, got some great thoughts, thought-provoking actions, some insights as to how they would like to think in this new normal, or we shouldn't call it a new normal, it's the normal now. So with that, thank you so much, and back to you, XR.
Thank you so much, Kamal, Sachin, Giladi, Pranya, for the engaging and thoughtful discussion. I'm sure the audience really enjoyed it. Just looking at the number of questions coming in, as well as the questions, very unique questions on self-managed learning paths, on even micro-learning, things that are coming up new in both the education and L&D sector. So thank you very much to all our panelists and our chair.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
So next up here on main track 1, we will have a CLO power panel. The subject is going to be on L&D's role as people development business partners. So I'll see you there on the next session on main track 1.